There's something about the woods, the way the trees whisper, the way the shadows stretch when the sun goes down. It's peaceful until it's not. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that still haunts me to this day. A story about a camping trip that started like any other, but ended in a nightmare. My girlfriend and I loved camping. It was our escape from the chaos of everyday life. We lived in Virginia, right in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. The forests there are ancient, almost alive. We'd been on dozens of trips, but this one was different. It was a small trail just 3 miles long, leading to a secluded campsite. The reviews online said it was peaceful, quiet, perfect. But the woods have a way of hiding secrets. The rain started as we got closer to the trailhead. It wasn't unusual. Mountain weather is unpredictable, but this rain felt heavier, darker, like it was trying to warn us. When we arrived, there was only one other car parked there. Its passenger door was slightly open, swaying in the wind. We thought it was strange, but we shrugged it off. Maybe the owner was careless. Maybe. But deep down, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. The trail was steep and the rain kept falling. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees towering like silent sentinels. It took us 2 hours to reach the campsite. When we got there, we saw it. A small tent already set up in the middle of the clearing. It was odd. The tent was tiny, barely big enough for one person. But what really made my skin crawl was the silence. No voices, no movement, just the sound of rain hitting the fabric. We set up our tent in the far corner, trying to ignore the feeling that we weren't alone. An hour later, we heard voices. 2 men appeared out of nowhere, kneeling just a few feet from our tent. They introduced themselves, said they'd been camping for a few days. But something was wrong. They were wearing jeans and t-shirts, not exactly hiking gear. And their tent, it was way too small for 2 people. They smiled, but their eyes were empty, hollow, like they weren't really there. Night fell, and the rain didn't stop. I woke up hours later, needing to use the bathroom. As I stepped out, I noticed that tent was open, empty. And then I heard it, voices whispering in the dark. I couldn't tell where they were coming from. My heart raced as I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. That's when I noticed them. The 2 men standing just a few feet away, staring at me with blank, emotionless faces. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they just watched. I woke my girlfriend and we grabbed what we could. We didn't think, we just ran. The trail was slick with rain, and every shadow felt like it was reaching for us. I looked back once, just once. The men were still there, standing in the same spot, watching us with those empty eyes. They didn't chase us, they didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to freeze the blood in my veins. When we got back to the car, the other vehicle was still there. The passenger door was open again. We drove straight to the nearest gas station and called the police. Days later, they told us the car belonged to a missing man. His belongings were gone, and the tent at the campsite was his. The 2 men, they were never found. Neither was the missing man. To this day, I don't know who those men were or what they wanted, but I do know this. They weren't there to camp. The woods are beautiful, but they're also dangerous. They hide things that don't belong in the light. I still go camping, but I'm always looking over my shoulder, always listening for voices in the dark. Because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't the ones we tell around the campfire. They're the ones that happen when the fire goes out. Imagine this. You're alone in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but trees, silence, and shadows. The kind of place where even the birds seem to hold their breath. This is where our story begins. A story that starts with a peaceful hike, but takes a turn into something far darker, something unnatural. Our protagonist was a traveler, someone who spent most of his life in airports, hotels, and office buildings. But on this day, he found himself in the quiet woods of Pennsylvania, with nothing but time to kill. He thought it would be a chance to relax, to breathe in the fresh air and forget about the chaos of his everyday life. But the forest had other plans. The hike started like any other. The trail was empty, the air was crisp, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. But then, he saw him, a man sitting on the ground, his face hidden beneath a hoodie. At first, he seemed harmless, maybe even asleep. But as our hiker passed by, the man's head snapped up, and his eyes locked onto him. Not a word was spoken, but the message was clear. You shouldn't be here. Shaken but determined, the hiker pressed on. Hours passed, and the forest grew quieter, as if it were holding its breath. He stopped to rest, sitting on a fallen log, when he saw it. The same man walking toward him. Slowly, deliberately. The hiker's heart raced as he packed up and hurried away. But then, he heard it. The sound of footsteps running, coming closer and closer and closer. The man caught up to him, blocking the trail. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, an old, worn, empty wallet. He held it out, insisting it belonged to the hiker. But it wasn't his. It couldn't be. The man's voice was low, almost a growl. Take it, he said. It's yours. The hiker, terrified, took the wallet. And then the man smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're welcome, he said before disappearing into the trees. By now, the sun was setting, casting long, jagged shadows across the trail. The hiker's mind raced as he hurried back to his car. But as he approached the parking lot, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A shadow, moving behind his car. It was him. The man was waiting, crouched, watching. The hiker's instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew he had to think fast. He unlocked the passenger door, slid inside, and locked the car just as the man lunged for the driver's side. The man pounded on the window, his voice a guttural scream. Give it back! Give it back! The hiker didn't wait. He started the car and sped away, the man's screams echoing in his ears. As he drove, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was gone, vanished into the trees. But the wallet was still in his hand, empty, useless, and yet it felt heavy, too heavy. The hiker reported the incident to the police, but they found no trace of the man. No footprints, no evidence. Just an empty wallet and a story that no one could explain. To this day, the hiker wonders, what was the wallet for? Was it a trap, a curse, or something worse? All he knows is that he'll never hike alone again, and neither should you. So, the next time you find yourself alone in the woods, remember this story. Remember the man in the hoodie. Remember the wallet. And ask yourself, what would you do if you heard footsteps behind you? If you saw a shadow waiting by your car? If you felt the weight of something unnatural in your hands? Be careful out there, because sometimes the forest doesn't let go. It was late October, the kind of time when the air feels crisp and the woods seemed to hold their breath. The perfect time for a hike, or so I thought. I often went alone, craving the solitude of the trails. But that weekend, solitude turned into something far darker. I chose a loop trail I'd hiked years before. It was quiet, secluded, just what I wanted. The first few miles were peaceful, just grassy fields and the occasional bird call. But as I entered the forest, the atmosphere shifted. The trees seemed to close in around me, their shadows stretching longer than they should have. That's when I saw him, a man, far ahead on the trail. At first, I thought he was just another hiker. But as he got closer, I noticed something wrong. He wasn't carrying a backpack. No water bottle, no gear, nothing. Just him, walking toward me with an unsettling calm. He waved. I waved back, my skin prickling. Then he stopped, turned, and asked me a question that froze my blood. "Where's your group at?" My heart raced. How did he know I usually hiked with a group? Or was he just guessing? I lied, telling him my friends were a few minutes behind me. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and walked away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. Even as I moved further down the trail, as the sun dipped below the trees, I set up camp far off the trail, hoping to avoid him. But the forest felt different now. The usual nighttime sounds, crickets, owls, were gone. It was too quiet, too still. I lay in my tent, staring at the ceiling, every nerve on edge. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the leaves. They were coming closer, and they stopped, right outside my tent. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loud, I was sure he could hear it. The footsteps didn't move. He was just standing there, waiting. Hours passed, each second stretching into an eternity. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. All I could do was listen, wondering if he was still out there, just beyond the thin fabric of my tent. When the first light of dawn finally crept through the trees, I unzipped the tent, my hands trembling. At first, I saw nothing, just the quiet forest, bathed in pale light. But then I noticed them, footprints fresh, deep, and unmistakably human. They led right up to the tree behind my tent. Whoever, or whatever, had been out there. They'd been standing there all night, watching, waiting. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I grabbed my gear and ran, my legs burning as I sprinted toward the trail. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of terror through me. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I drove away, my hands gripping the wheel, the forest shrinking in my rearview mirror. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Not really. I told my friends what happened. I even reported it to the police, but they never found him. Whoever he was, whatever he wanted, he's still out there. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods, I still hear those footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Have you ever felt like you were being watched in the woods? Or encountered something or someone that didn't belong? Share your story in the comments below. And if you like this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Stay safe out there, and always trust your instincts.